You're listening to the Valley Current.
Hey, Len, it's good to hear your voice. How have you been?
Hi, Jack.
You sent me something, or I sent you something about what's going on in Japan, and you wrote back in reply, and I'm kind of interested in how you think about the problem of the Japanese are all getting too old, and they are not as organized as you are in caring for themselves. So they're talking about maybe making legal euthanasia there.
Well, the Japanese situation is somewhat complicated. Their attitude toward old age is different than ours. They will, for the most part, prefer to have an elderly person live in the home of a child.
Right.
And the revelation, it's very much like India. The revelation that they have an older person, especially if that person is demented, they will not reveal it, or they will be extremely reluctant to reveal it. That's exactly what happened to Alex Comfort. I don't think did I tell you that story?
No.
Well, for a long time, it was believed that Alzheimer's disease did not exist in India.
Mm-hmm.
And Alex, who, as you know, is a close friend of mine, went to India to find out whether that was true.
Right.
And he found out it was true, but not for a medical reason, a sociological reason. Families in India do not want anyone to know that they have a demented family member. Consequently,
it's like a stain. It's like a stain on their DNA.
Yeah, it's a stain on their familial reputation, or whatever the consideration is. They don't want the outside world to know that a demented person exists in the family.
Right.
Despite the fact that they hide that person in the family, take care of that person very well, but do not make the knowledge of that person's existence known.
Right.
Consequently, there are few, if any, reports of Alzheimer's disease for that reason.
Okay.
And not for the reason that Alzheimer's doesn't exist in India or Japan. It does.
Right. Right.
So there are lots of sociological differences in different cultures that bear upon attitudes towards aging.
Right.
There are some societies, there's the old story, I don't know how true it is, of Eskimos who will send an old person out on an ice floe to die.
Yeah.
But there's little, if any, evidence for that. But the desire to get rid of an old person in some cultures does exist.
Right.
Not in our culture. So those considerations are now understood. And then there was something else you sent me where I said that fact has been known for 100 years, and that is that the greatest longevity in humans occurs in those with the greatest financial resources.
Right.
That has been known for 100 years. It's something that's rediscovered every 6 months by people who don't know the history.
Right.
But the more money you have, the assumption and the facts are that the people with money will take care of their health better by seeing physicians, accepting the advice of physicians, leading healthier lives in respect to risk-taking and food intake and health care than will people without the resources to do those things.
Right.
It even makes common sense, let alone the factual backup.
But they don't necessarily, even with the wealth, believe in taking vaccines. Some of them, right?
Of course, nothing is 100%.
Right. I mean, it's an interesting problem, which is people of substantial means may well not do things they should be doing, and that will result in them getting the virus and maybe dying of it, because if you're over 65, the risk of dying of it is much higher than if you're under 65.
Even the National Institute on Aging is biased against aging. The National Institute on Aging does not promote, does not support, does not fund research on the etiology of biological aging, which is the greatest risk factor for the leading causes of death in this country. And you know my article about that. The link to it exists at the bottom of every one of my email messages. But I have showered the NIA with that statement, and they still have not addressed it, because the medical community is concerned only with disease and pathology. They have no understanding of what is more fundamental than the disease and the underlying etiology of aging. Aging, as we all know, there's certainly very few physicians who do not understand that aging is the greatest risk factor for the leading causes of death. But they do nothing about it, nothing. And that's why the age-associated diseases will continue to remain as they are, namely unsolved.
Well, they think that it's something that's not worth studying, right? Like it's almost.
I don't know what their argument is, other than physicians are synonymous with disease and pathology.
Right.
Physician research and interest is not in fundamental biology. That is the most likely reason, but it's unconscious. They think that the only thing that is of importance in human life is health and disease and pathology. They can't think any further than that. And even perhaps more important is that when they go to Congress, when these various institutes and subparts of them go to Congress to defend or submit budgets, the Congress people, the deciders on funding, only understand disease. That's why Alzheimer's disease budget at the NIA is greater than the entire other part of the budget of the NIA. Alzheimer's disease has more support, more funding than perhaps even cancer or stroke or cardiovascular disease. The funding is enormous. Why? Because they have been sold a bill of goods, unfortunately, by the first director of the NIA, who was a personal friend of mine, Bob Butler, who was a psychiatrist. And he was the first one to boost interest in Alzheimer's by the NIA at the time that he was director. He later publicly regretted the fact that he boosted funding of Alzheimer's disease because he lost control of it.
Mm-hmm.
The people who went to Congress to ask for money discovered that they could get it all they want and more from Congress for Alzheimer's disease and for nothing else. So if you look now at the programs at the National Institute on Aging, you'll find that 90% of them are for Alzheimer's disease research in one form or another, or care, despite the fact that there are many more people who die from cancer, cardiovascular disease, and stroke than they die from Alzheimer's.
Right.
In fact, the death from Alzheimer's disease is almost impossible to determine except at autopsy, and very few autopsies are done. The diagnosis of Alzheimer's disease is done by essentially guesswork and by various tests that are not that are full of false negatives and false positives.
Right.
So it's a very complex story that has issues of politics, phony beliefs, bias, the necessity for the institutes to get money by whatever means necessary. And if it means disregarding aging, even the NIA will disregard aging in order to get money for Alzheimer's disease only, to keep their people employed. They're all trying to cover their asses, and that's how they do it.
Right. Well, do you think part of the problem is people believe there's just too many causes? Like if you actually go back and look at sort of the theories of what goes on when the second law of thermodynamics plays its role in causing breakdown of cellular material and cell senescence and the rest, which I know you discovered, there's just too many multiplying causes over time. Or do you think that's too simple to be thinking about?
Well, you can argue that there are too many aspects of the aging process to count.
Mm-hmm.
On the one hand. On the other hand, you could say that all of the causes are due to the second law.
Right.
So you can make it complex or simple as you wish. The second law makes the basic statement that energy is always tending to dissipate. And as a consequence of that, biological molecules become destroyed or dysfunctional. And the rest can be described in the hundreds of effects or tens of thousands of effects of dysfunctional molecules that remain unrepaired, because the repair processes in older people also suffer the same fate as the functioning molecule.
Right. You are indirectly saying, even in yourself, that the decrements of aging are the second law playing its role on your physical self, even with all the awareness that you have of it. It's unstoppable. It's a train that's moving down the tracks in one direction and one direction only, and it doesn't get reversed, and it's not reversible, right?
That's right. And because of the belief of Wally and I that it is universal, that is the second law applies to all matter, whether it's living or dead, has the same consequence. All abiotic or non-living things will age, even if you keep your car in the garage and never move it. In several hundred years, it's going to rust to pieces, or it's going to be impossible to drive for some kind of breakdown that occurs. So everything in the universe is the result of increasing energy dispersion or increasing entropy.
Entropy.
Entropy was at its lowest form during the Big Bang and has been increasing ever since, with some steps along the way in respect to life forms that have learned how to take that energy and use it for a while only to do what we know biology does. But it is eventual that it fails, that all animals and plants fail. There are many people who I have arguments with who say, well, there are many animals that are immortal. They have been, well, the redwood tree is sometimes used, or the bristlecone pine, but they all are examples not of immortality, but of the fact that the atoms and molecules that were present in the beginning of the cell lineages that gave rise to those organisms, that those founding molecules and atoms have long since disappeared in the cell lineages that are considered to be very old. So the sense of identity is gone. A redwood tree today has the only atoms and molecules in it that are old in the dead tissue, not in the cambium layers or root hairs. And the same thing is true of alleged animals that live forever, which has been claimed by a lot of people who don't understand the phenomenon of molecular turnover, which is a constant event in all living things.
I mean, do you think the medical schools should be teaching more about the laws of physics than they teach about the laws of biology or the laws of chemistry?
Well, certainly there are some laws of physics, like the second law, that they should be taught. Yes, of course.
I mean, it's like the unified theory of aging is
but they're not taught it. I was never taught it. I took all of the medical school courses up into clinical practice. So I have all of the preclinical sciences that an MD takes. I've taken all of them, and I've taught some of them. Mm-hmm. But yes, a physician needs to specialize in some narrow branch of medicine because it's impossible for them to know everything about all aspects of health. Even a GP. When I go to my GP, I have to teach him about aging. He never did understand it until I taught it to him.
Was he glad to hear it, or was he like, damn, I thought I was going to be able to do it?
He's a person who acknowledges that he doesn't know everything, and that he certainly doesn't know very much about aging, and therefore he tolerates what I explained to him.
So along those lines, you are very much of the belief that there is an absolute limit to life for humans at about, 125 or so max?
Well, yes, if you believe the data about Jean Clement, then 123 plus a few months has been the longest that a human has lived, yes.
And health span is always far shorter than lifespan, right? They're never going to be perfectly matched.
Yes.
Same reasons, right?
Of course.
I mean, it's inevitable that health span will fall off sooner.
Yes, of course.
I mean, if you say your goal is to get to 125, and I've never heard you say that, but let's pretend you said that. What would your expectation be about your health span falling off? Because this is the Japanese problem, I think, in a nutshell.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, I'm experiencing, and I have for the past couple of years, decrements of aging. And I don't expect that to stop or reverse, certainly. They will continue to appear. and serious complications could appear momentarily. I'm aware of that. The longevity life tables indicate that I have about a year and a half to live.
Yeah, but you sound a lot better than that. And you've got your brain span with you far more than most people in their 90s, Len, with your birthday coming.
That might be. I've been very lucky that my cognition has remained pretty much intact.
Right. I call it brain span because I think it goes right in that whole question of where does it fit between health span and lifespan and work span and brain span. And you got to have brain span to really engage in knowledge work, right?
Yeah. Well, you are exhibiting the same positive phenomenon cognitively in that you show no decrements. And how old are you now?
I'm in my 60s, but I have to say, I do observe sometimes things that I would feel historically I'd be able to know and memorize much faster and recall much faster. It starts to slow down. It's almost like the processing speed is slowing down over time.
Well,
right?
You're beginning to behave like a normal human will behave.
Right.
That is in older years, 50s, 60s, you will begin to experience loss of short-term memory, increased reaction time, slowness in some activities, maybe motion, maybe walking, who knows. But they are all usual phenomena. They are not indicative of loss of health. You are not unhealthy because you can't call up the names of people you knew when you were 15 years old.
Right. But you do observe it, right? You do observe this slowness.
If you're aware enough and have enough working brain cells, yes, of course you become aware of it. But there's little you can do about it. Very, very little.
Well, Len, let me ask you, because I've been wondering about this. You know, there's a artificial intelligence program that's made a big splash called ChatGPT. Chat, G as in God, P as in perpetual, T as in technology. It stands for generative programming something technology. It's an acronym. It's a 3-letter acronym. And it's a chat system. I've been wondering whether that in some ways is going to help people stay curious and sharp and mentally astute, or whether it's going to make people lazy because they're not thinking of writing their own words. They're getting this system to spew words back at them based on a query that they put in. What's your thinking? Have you tried it? Have you tried this system out?
No, I never understood it clearly enough. But
I mean, I'll send you an example, and you'll be shocked at what it can do. You'll be shocked at what it's capable of doing.
If it is relieving you or taking away from you your some fundamental activities or intellectual pursuits, I don't find that to be a healthy thing.
Well, it could be instigating. It could be instigating curiosity, though, right?
Well,
as opposed to watching TV.
I can only speak from my personal experiences and those that I've observed in other people who I respect, and that is, they continue to have an attitude of questioning everything.
Right.
Or of not accepting everything without question.
Right.
And being curious. And those characteristics are critical Uh, I mean, I question everything, even this current situation with these balloons.
Right.
I think I discussed that with you, or I did with my kids recently.
Yeah.
They are the nomenclature used and the failure to grasp fundamental facts is unbelievable. Even with the senior politicians, they call that big balloon a spy balloon, even before they captured anything from the downed parts that had anything to do with the collection of information or data.
Right.
The assumptions that are made are unbelievable. And they don't understand that balloons have been flying from Asia to the United States for centuries.
And from the United States.
I told you, I think I included you in a group of messages I sent about the Japanese balloons during the war.
Right.
When they sent balloons loaded with explosives over the United States. Why? Because the prevailing winds at high altitude are from west to east.
Right.
So it makes it easy. And there are tens of thousands of weather balloons sent into the air in virtually every advanced country in the world every day.
Right.
And the reverse is also true. In the higher altitudes below the equator and also above the equator, there is dust and dirt from Africa that sweeps across the Atlantic Ocean, covering the United States every day in lower altitudes.
Right. This is ChatGPT writing an essay in real time. I can tell you what the essay topic was that I wrote in. I wrote in, write an essay on the etiology of aging, including the role of the laws of physics and chemistry and biology in accord with the second law of thermodynamics and cellular senescence over time for human beings, and include the work of Leonard Hayflick and Walter Bortz.
Well, I do understand that from a computer's point of view, and that is that you have an algorithm that includes, in this case, let's say 6 variables, including my name and that of Wally,
right,
and aging. And once the algorithm discovers an article in which those six variables exist, it prints it out.
Yeah, it generates a very nice.
It's no big deal.
Yeah, it generates a very nice compilation of actual essay-like text.
Well, but it's copying it from some pre-existing source. It's not making anything up.
I know let's say it's trained on expert data. It's giving you, if it's trained correctly, and let's say it's trained on your writing and on Wally Bortz's writing and maybe other people who have cited to you, as opposed to just giving you back a mess of links, it's giving you back something that seems almost human-like. Aging is a complex biological phenomenon that affects all living organisms.
Yeah, but that's all word for word from some article somewhere. It looks very familiar to me.
Right.
So I don't find it to be a miracle at all.
Okay, well, people are finding this to be miraculous.
Exactly what I would expect in an algorithm.
Yeah, I mean, people are finding this to be a somewhat miraculous because
there are a tiny fraction of people who know what an algorithm is.
Yeah. Well, a tiny fraction of people that can write in normal English.
And then it goes into secondary and tertiary text that it discovers. For example, when it reads now the word entropy, it will call up articles on entropy.
Right.
Which is no big deal if you understand how algorithms and computers work.
But don't you think for, say, a younger person that's just trying to get familiar with the literature in a very fast way? I mean, years ago, we had something called the Encyclopedia Britannica. Remember when your parents would buy those 60 books that you'd have on the shelf in your house? And you'd be able to go to it as the ultimate resource for facts and stories and articles.
Sure.
And that's gone. That's totally gone. There's a Wikipedia. There's a Wikipedia that's sort of supported by the commons. Whether it's accurate or not is another question, right? There's lots of databases that are paid databases. There's a lot of expert compilations out there.
How do you get onto the site, this strange name site?
You go to, you can just type in Google ChatGPT sign up, and then you sign up and get an account. They're not even charging for it, Len. This is free.
Google, what else?
Well, you would go into Google and just type in chat, ChatGPT, G as in God, P as in perpetual, T technology.
Okay.
Sign up. So think of it as it's like the way you see a spreadsheet percolate the numbers in front of you. That was viewed as magical years ago.
Right.
See that? Well, to imagine that you could put in a textual query, the more detailed, the better. And that will then make it search more specifically without citations. Look, there's a lot of negatives here because it's not telling you where it got this data. It's not giving you any citations. It's not giving you anything that you can really probe more deeply.
Probably because it's illegal for them to copy other people's work.
There you go. That's exactly what a lawyer would say, and you've got your legal hat on. That's exactly right. That's the concern. I'm sure they want it to look as though they're really just deriving information as facts and as non-copyrightable facts, as opposed to expression of compilations of information that other people have already written. Right?
Of course. Yes, sure.
I mean, the interesting part is a lot of what you've said in this conversation about the research monies not really going into the ideology of aging, and that's the footer on your email. That's the bumper sticker that you would say is your brand that you want people to know. When you do these searches, you do sort of see the fact that there isn't necessarily a lot of work that's gone into this, because it's not giving a lot of other names that perhaps that if it was a well-researched. We did the same thing in the area of Alzheimer's, that probably would give a huge list of researchers doing research on Alzheimer's for the very reason you said, right?
Of course, they've thrown so much money at it that it is now seeping down to the people who are less and less competent. It's exactly what happened during the war on cancer that was organized by Nixon.
Right. So I wonder whether this, to some degree, when it gets better and better over time, if it gets better and better over time, will change the way students approach a particular topic, and then the way in which research is carried out. Because we are seeing somewhat of an automated helper for at least providing what arguably would be an overview. Now, you'd have to have the right query to go in, so you have to have enough information to give it a seed that makes it worthwhile. But to me, it's providing a lot better results than we would get from a Google search, right? In my mind.
Yeah, it's bringing up the information that you would otherwise be able to find by doing a Google search.
Well, you do the Google search, and then you'd have a bunch of links, and you'd have to traverse those.
Exactly. So it's doing all the linking for you.
Right. It's creating the Encyclopedia Britannica entry, albeit without the footnotes and without identifying the sources,
Yeah.
in a way that lets you then presumably dive deeper in whatever way you choose to dive deeper. Now, if you're a student and you see second law, you might ask yourself, well, what the hell is the first law and what the hell is the third law, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's a funny thing because what comes up in my mind is everyone knows the First Amendment to the U.S. Constitution. Everyone knows the Second Amendment. Very few people know the Third Amendment to the U.S. Constitution. And it's like a puzzler when you say, well, what's the Third Amendment? And they're like, there is a Third Amendment? Well, yeah, of course. There's a Bill of Rights that are 10 amendments. And I bet if I ask you, you're going to tell me that you don't know what the Third Amendment is to the U.S. Constitution.
Well, I may not know the particular number, but I do know the 3 or 4.
If I ask you, what's the Third Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, most people just...
I would not know it.
Right. It's about quartering of soldiers in private homes.
Yeah. Okay.
That's illegal as a matter of Third Amendment law. Now, that just would never happen in our times. It's just so unheard of. So people are like, why do we even have a Third Amendment? There isn't going to be quartering of soldiers in private homes.
That's the basis for the stupid thinking.
Right.
Those politicians and the Supreme Court justices who stick so close to the Constitution that it's like sticking to the word of the Bible as written 2,000 years ago, when human civilization has advanced in light years from those days. And the people who wrote the Bible, even if it was God, or people who wrote the American Constitution, had no idea of what was to come. But these justices think that it applies to everything possible.
Right.
And it cannot. It's impossible. That's the definition of a conservative.
Right. I was going to say the third law of thermodynamics is that the entropy of a system approaches a constant value.
Oh, yeah.
Temperature approaches absolute zero.
Yeah, it's that the energy state shall reach equilibrium.
Well, maybe there's something to the idea that if you can actually, freeze yourself, as some people imagine cryogenics allows, you actually can enable some form of perpetual version of yourself, right? There are people that believe that, right? Don't they?
Well, they believe that by preserving themselves in liquid nitrogen, they can remain in a state for that period in the future when people discover how to resurrect you from that condition.
Right. Right. So if you've got some
the likelihood of that happening is as close to zero as you can get.
But people spend a small fortune, right?
Of course they do. And the insurance companies love it because they're paying for what they're arguing is self-contradictory. They're claim the insurance company shall pay for the upkeep of the liquid nitrogen with insurance policies that they buy. But they fail to understand that the insurance policy is paid upon death and not while they're still allegedly have the potential to become alive. So it doesn't make any sense from an insurance point of view for a company to pay an annual premium forever to a person who is essentially dead, but that person believes they will return from the dead.
Right. But you've never thought of doing anything like this, right?
Of course not. Of course not.
I mean, you've thought of it more like the limit is about 123 or maybe 125. maybe 150, some people are suggesting. That seems pretty far out there, right?
Well, I don't think it's going to get much beyond, if it gets beyond all of about 120.
Right. And then the real question is, what does health span look like?
Yes, well, that's always difficult to pin down because people get sick at virtually any age.
But you've actually proven that you can make it to your 90s self-sufficiently and in a way that allows you to continue to benefit society, because you're still writing, you're still pushing various organizations to reallocate resources into more interesting research areas than what they're allocated to. And you're doing it in a self-sufficient way. You don't require grants, you don't require salary, you don't require a lab. You've done it right out of your home. So bravo to you, Len.
Well, thank you for that. I appreciate that.
That's big. I think that if everyone could live the life that you're living, the healthcare system might actually be able to survive its challenges. Because if you look at most people in this world, when if you go, I was getting my annual physical yesterday. So I was in a healthcare center. I said, boy, most of those people look really sick to me. I mean, most of the people going to a healthcare center, they're pretty ill. They're not exactly pictures of health. So it's an interesting question. I mean, what are they doing? What are they doing?
So you're in good health.
Yeah, I mean, you learn a lot when you go and get your annual. But I think to myself, you know, all of that is probably to some degree going to get automated over time. To some degree, it's going to be like a constant picture of what is your health with devices that you wear and the like, right?
Yeah, it's certainly a possibility.
You sound really good, and I guess we won't see you next month, but maybe we'll do another couple of calls and talk about this bigger question of ideology of aging and where is it going. I'm going to send you some stuff that comes out of ChatGPT, and you can tell me how much of it is wrong.
Okay, well, thanks, Jack. It's always a great pleasure to speak with you, and I certainly hope it continues.
Of course, and we'll look forward to it. Thanks, Len. Talk to you later. Take care of yourself.
Regards to Lee, and
of course.
Certainly to you, and thank you for calling.
All right, you're welcome. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Tune in next time on The Valley Current.